Thank you very much. And so that means we are officially going to get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to our 2026 ARCA Virtual Learning Institute. It's so wonderful to have you here. Throughout the month of May, we're hosting a series of wonderful presentations that focus on disability content and content to support rehabilitation counselors, students, and educators and those in clinical practice. This presentation is Confronting Self, Addressing Ableism in Therapeutic Spaces, an incredible reminder of our competencies and what we need to do. Just as a reminder, we ask that folks keep their mics off while the presenters are speaking. And you're encouraged to use the chat. If you have questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. The presenters will be answering questions throughout the presentation. I would like to take a moment to thank our presenters, Dr. Joey Tapia, who is an assistant professor and associate department chair in the Department of Counseling and Human Services at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. He owns and operates Vanda Counseling Collaborative, where he provides and supervises clinical services across the lifespan. He provides play, individual, relationship, and family therapy in English, Espanol, e-sign language. How was that?
Beautiful.
um, Dr. Tapia's research focuses on ableism in mental health and the development of disability responsive practices. He has spent his career focusing on serving the disability community in a variety of ways over the last 15 years. He serves as a president of Deaf Overcoming Violence through Empowerment, DOVE, a nonprofit supporting survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault who are deaf, deaf-blind, deaf-disabled, and hard of hearing. He is the 2021 award winner for the ACA Arthur A. Hitchcock Distinguished Professional Service Award. And we also have Dr. Brynn Adamson, who's an assistant professor in the Department of Health Sciences at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs. She focuses on long-term exercise participation among adults with disabilities, with a particular interest in the ways we communicate about exercise and the ways to increase accessibility and inclusivity in the community-based physical activity. She has worked with large interdisciplinary teams that include researchers, community members, and recreation facility staff to develop and implement the inclusive community exercise training. This training addresses a major known barrier to physical activity participation among people with disabilities. Whew, two wonderful folks with a great deal of experience. And we're so glad you're here. And with that, I'll turn over the mic to the two of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. We've done a lot and we still have a lot to do. Granted, that's part of what this work is. Brynn and I have been collaborators over the last 5 years, I would say, and have worked on a variety of projects. And we'll talk about one that we're actively working on, and that's part of a presentation today. For some of it, you'll hear, I'll spend most of the time in a clinical background, and then we'll transition to Brynn and talk about research and what does our current findings look like as we're working on some of this. I'm going to share my screen now. And so, Vicky, will you give me some indication that you see this? I saw, thank you. Okay, so this is important in many ways. So I come from, I have a CRC, obviously. I did my undergrad in rehab services and my graduate degree in rehabilitation counseling, and then counselor education and supervision for my PhD. And I've been in voc rehab, I've done private rehab, and then just more private practice in clinical settings. And this has often just been a large theme of the work I've done with folks that acquire disabilities later in life, which will come through with some of the things we'll talk about today. We have another contributor, Cassandra Medellin. She's not here with us today. She's a graduate student, and it is the last week of classes and work. And we said you contributed enough. She was needing some time, so she's not here, but she does wish she would be here with us. Additionally, we have other contributors. So part of this, we'll talk about a study that we are currently analyzing. It was a 50 participant qualitative study examining ableism and mental health with uh, clients, disabled clients' experiences receiving individual, relationship, or family therapy. And so we're in that now. And so these are some of our contributors who are part of that project, who are important and essential, that we just wanted to recognize. So we have Alexis Patton, Kim Daniel, Cameron Mays, and then Lauren Kuffner, and then Tomoko Wegner. Okay, I'm going to skip some. We have 40 slides on here. We were very ambitious, but we're going to move through. So I'm going to just move some things. This is what I want to get to. I just want to get a sense of the audience. That would help a lot, especially when I speak. It can help me tailor what we share with you. When we think about this space we're in, the topics are obviously here wanting to get some additional information. I want to understand how you were trained with working with clients with disabilities. If you don't mind putting that in the chat, I would appreciate it. Additionally, when you think about that, how you were trained, I also want you to include what type of messages you were given in supporting clients who are disabled. And you'll hear me pivot between person first and identity first language. Again, obviously, we know this from our work, it's dependent on the individual. You'll just hear me bounce between the two. So if you don't mind putting that in the chat, I think I can see. Yes, I can. Center for Independent Living. Okay, thank you. Oh, Knoxville, lovely. So rehab counseling, thank you. Okay, so a lot of my rehab people, hello. I should say I got mine at the University of North Texas with some lovely humans. Kent State, lovely. Okay, a lot of my CRCs, welcome. We got to get those 100 CEUs. UNT grad too, welcome, Veronica. That was 2015? Yes, sounds right. We barely missed each other. Back then when programs were 48 hours, let's see. Okay, nice. Okay, well, thank you. Obviously, you can continue sharing. Um, oh, UNC, yeah, Charlotte, nice. Well, obviously, many of you get this understanding, right? The interesting thing is, so I have someone who have spent 15 years working with the deaf community, people with brain injuries, people, and then now spinal cord injuries more recently. And I'm a non-disabled person who have spent 15 years in this space. And so ableism is constantly and at the otherisms, because that's not the only identity that many people, the people we work with hold, constantly having to navigate that, figure that out, work through it. Um, oh, thank you, Heather. So wanting to just name that, right? It's like this is a life. We live in an ableist society, and with some of these messages that we encounter, either for growing up or in professional spaces, and or just from ourselves, how do we navigate and work through some of that and just make space to name it, right? That it is a real thing that I too can contribute to ableist messages, even when my intention is not to, even though my entire education has been around this space, that I still can make certain messages or inferences explicit or implicit related to this. Something that I thought was helpful. So I'm a registered play therapy supervisor. I work with kids, again, across the lifespan. That was later in my career working with children. Because I came from a rehab counseling program. We did not learn how to work with kids, and got that training in my doctoral work. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just some of that that's important to know. And then we'll move to what does it look like when we work with adolescents? What does it look like when we work with adults? What considerations we need to have? So here's what we know. We know that there's 61 million people documented that have disabilities. There's more, right? There may be undocumented folks that have disabilities or folks that don't report because maybe the service, they don't necessarily need services or the data is not captured in that way. So we have a large representation in our society, and yet we have barriers to access of care. You all know this. I don't need to. We don't need to go through every detail, but you get it. Based on what I can see, you're people who get it. Still frustrating, of course. When we talk about mental health and the relationship to services with disabled people and them receiving services, there's a lot of factors here that created disparities to get access and quality care. So we know that people who are living with a disability, depending on the daily messages they encounter, environmental or coming from other humans, that can become distressing, that can create additional needs that might be mental health related. Not necessarily the disability isn't mental health related, but the environmental and or conditions that they navigate may result in needing that support. And yet we encounter a lot of issues when it comes to just the environmental spaces, them not having accessible access. We know this is an issue. Even with telehealth, the boom that happened post-COVID or during and post-COVID really expanded service delivery to rural communities, to folks with limited transportation, and other factors. And yet we still see an issue with accessibility in the telemental health space. When we talk about disability, so one of the, Cameron Mace, one of the contributors, worked on this definition where it captured the defining disability based on a broad category that captures 4 dimensions. Because we know, depending on the setting we're in, depending on the space, depending on context, that might look and mean something different. And so between the 4 dimensions, identity, right, it can be an identity for an individual, a lived experience, a mechanism for pathologizing, which we see often, as well as a category within particular systems. And so here's just some expansion on each. And we felt this is important because we know that the traditional definitions for disability, often we derive it from the federal government that defines it. And this is more nuanced because our society, it is not just dependent on limitations and or a lack of access. There's so many other dimensions to someone's lived experience. And so this kind of worked to capture multiple angles of someone's identity. Ableism, so it's interesting. I wish this was, gosh, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. I wish when I look back at my program, while our program surrounded itself with supporting and working with clients with disabilities, ableism within the program wasn't addressed. We never really dived into us, excuse me, language, regarding how do we view ourselves, how do we view others, how do we view disability within our own lived experience, within that of how we view society and those living in society. That just wasn't, I didn't get to do that. And if some of you did, I love that for you. I'm glad that that is happening. It wasn't really until I entered my doctoral program, and then even afterwards as an educator now, where it's like we have to unpack some of this, because if not, it's going to show up later and it's going to impact how we show up in the work that we do. And so when we think about it, when we understand ableism, again, it is a disability-based discrimination. It's deficit-oriented in nature, that comes with a slew of assumptions. And the work that we all do in this space, we have heard stories, we have read stories, you may have experienced them yourself. And so we know that ableism is alive and well, and we're here to say, okay, we know it exists, we know it's a thing, we know well-intended people engage in ableist mindset and ableist messages. What can we be doing to counter that and work through that? Because it doesn't inherently make you a bad person, right? It's just the spaces we grew up in, the spaces we navigate. Now, because of time, we're going to skip that, but know that it's there. You'll have access to the PowerPoint. I'm trying to move everything around so I can see people. Hold on. There we go. Now, we're talking about counseling. Add counseling, social work, psychology, any other mental health provider. We know this is across the board where there's a lack of preparation. In some contexts, depending on the program, even some rehab programs, even though it's meant to be focused, we are often more prepared, which is incredible and great. There's still some, but depending on topic, depending on population, there's still barriers and limitations to the work that we get to do. For example, we learned how to work very well with individuals, one-on-one. Most rehab counseling programs are not built to expand to provide family therapy or relationship therapy. It's very focused on the individual. So sometimes while we work in systems, we tend to be very individual focused and sometimes require this need to zoom out, zoom back in, zoom out, zoom back in. So it just depends on the level of training, level of exposure. But we know that in general, outside of rehab counseling, people are not prepared. Um, I did a dissertation on relationship therapists who worked with couples where one partner is disabled and one partner's not disabled, and ableism was riddled throughout all of their language. They literally avoided the word disability. And so we know this happens because of internalized ableism and layers of messaging around we can't talk about it. We shouldn't go there, and that creates distress and ruptures within the therapeutic relationship because it leaves certain things off the table from discussion, right? Or clients might not feel like they can talk about their experience because then their counselor might not know what to do with it. And what we have found, what we'll talk about later, some of the findings that we're even seeing from clients who experience services is they didn't want to bring it up because they had a good relationship with their therapist. They didn't want to bring this into the space and say, hey, you're missing something, or hey, you're not addressing this properly, or hey, that was not okay what you said. And so we know these things happen, or ruptures in care altogether because of how they show up. A large portion of this too is this attributing mental health symptoms to the disability, obviously disability dependent, but often just immediately making those assumptions and attributing that to those experiences. Obviously, we know this of our own bias. This happens again, well-intended humans trained to create healing in spaces, and yet we often can be the ones that create harm and perpetuate harm. So another interesting thing that's important to just like internally wrestle with and just be mindful of is flexibility is hard. It's interesting when we think about mental health services, it is a business operating with the goal of helping and healing. And so with those two come together, it's hard at times, policies are very ableist in nature. They don't offer flexibility to clients who need them. And so that can be some others. This unwillingness to educate self without imposing that energy on the client to educate the counselor, right? This tends to we try to help students or just graduates understand it's not their job to teach you. You need to go learn about this, but we do still see this inflexibility with exploring that, gaining that knowledge and information. And then not being accommodating to cancellations that are related to maybe medical needs or disability needs. That is, again, a lot of policies that are built are not with that in mind. It's with the what is it called? Person in the building or virtually for billing purposes, right? It's like that's if they're missing 3 appointments consecutively because of health-related reasons, the policies are often not set up for success to ensure that the client gets what they need, knowing that there might be flare-ups or there might be some inconsistencies due to their own needs. We'll talk about assessments later, but just a lot of data came around the assessments that we utilize that we lean on for important diagnostic data, but often doesn't serve the client. And we don't often do a good job about really being transparent about the ways questions are asked afterwards and or why we collect certain data. We just often just operate as like we need to collect this. Let's administer these. Um, so yes, there's a lot there. So we're going to talk about a few. So again, talked about I'm a registered play therapy supervisor. So we'll talk about what it means to work with children and providing developmentally appropriate interventions, adolescents, and then adults. But I'll be spending time on the relationship side because I feel like we know how to work with individuals. It's what do we do when we work with systems? To me, that's super vital. So children, and also, my rate of speech might be a little fast. If you need me to slow down, just put a little note and say, take it a notch down, and I will. I'm just mindful of time, but I can skip. There's some things I can skip through. So when we think about children, and we think about their lived experience, and if you are disabled in this room and grew up disabled, and just the messages you received and or stories you've heard from others who navigated life really early with a disability and what that meant for them to navigate the medical system, the education system, the community, their family system. There's a lot of important things that therapeutically that we need to know that goes beyond what we tend to collect during intake sessions with families. And so, first off, when we think about just, and we'll talk about this later when it comes to disability responsive practices, but when we think about how our space is even set up, often it's not set up with accessibility in mind. It's set up with, depends on the type of space. So, obviously, playrooms, they're often set up for functionality, but not necessarily with accessibility in mind. And so I need to understand for early on if I'm going to work with a child where they document that they have a disability on the paperwork, I need to understand is my space set up for them and what do I need to shift or modify before they arrive? And so that's some work that we do, but it's important work because if not, what messages am I sending to the child when they're trying to engage with something that they may not have access to because of height and or location or whatnot? When we talk, we know this. A lot of what we navigate is work, it's often with the family system, negative messages, harmful, deficit, ableist messages coming directly from the family system, either from cultural, religious, and or other mind values that kind of just bleed into how they organize what they share with their loved one that is harmful. So I want to gather information on how the caregivers respond to the child. R, it comes from emotionally focused therapy. It's accessibility, responsiveness, and emotionally engagement. But accessibility is not. It's separate. It's access. Like, are you accessible as a person when a child has a need? Responsiveness. Are you responsive when they communicate? Um, are you attuned to what's going on for them? And emotional engagement. Are they emotionally engaged when they need to be for the child, or do they, again, maybe communicate messages that are more harmful? What environments do they have access to? We have to know that even when we work with at any age, I want to know this. And what type of accommodations and or access do we need to consider for the space? Uh, When we think about that again, yeah, we can, maybe if there's time, we'll get there. We didn't vocalize this at the beginning, but if there's questions, please feel free to ask in the chat. I'll be sure I'm paying attention to it. So if something comes up, I'm happy to. Brynn and I are happy to address it. Um, so when I think about assessing the environment, I need to know the type of materials I'm offering. Some of you are familiar with playrooms, some of you may not be, but in playrooms, we have very specific materials that we offer the child for access for expression. From a developmental perspective, talk therapy is not appropriate for children. We're talking 3 to 10, 3 to 11, depending. That's a very neurotypical kind of age range, neurodivergent, where it just depends. We're looking at other things. The setup of the room, what kind of individual needs might I need to consider when it comes to lighting, when it comes to space, when it comes to just sensory-based needs. The caregiver experience, right? How do they show up? How do they communicate? How do they receive me? And then any linguistic differences. So if I'm working with someone who's speaking a different language that I may or may not know, what factors am I taking into account from a cultural perspective? Um, we should do this for all ages, but assessing development is crucial and essential across the lifespan. Just because someone is chronologically the age that they present doesn't mean they are developmentally the age they present. If I'm looking across domains from social, cognitive, physical, and emotional development, I need to be mindful that those four domains don't always have to be aligned. They're often in different places. Some children are right on par with their neurotypical age, and some are not. Doesn't mean that's bad, good or bad. They will catch up, but I need to assess for those things. And so that data can come from schools, can come from families and or other services that they engage with. With most of the kids that I work with, I'm working with OTs and PTs and speech therapists, gathering data, with the schools, if they directly with the teacher or with the school social worker or the school counselor, school psychologist, those are more rare on my end. Um, yes, and so when I work with families, we often are the advocates, right? We serve in that role, and it's important that we are in that role. And sometimes that means if I'm catching messages that are ableist, I need to help correct them. And the thing about it is how we talk about it matters. We know that since, honestly, since the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter movement, anytime race was talked about, it was just dependent on the circles and settings that was either not okay, or you could engage in a conversation. And this is when we think about just confronting these experiences, these isms, it is important as practitioners of how we do that. We have to do that tactfully and strategically, knowing I still want the parent on my side because if I can help them shift how they view their child, that's going to be better for the child than me trying to communicate judgmental or shame-based messages to the parent. Those of you who are parents in here, uh, how, I don't know, I guess, can you send a reaction if you're a parent in here and or feel okay disclosing that? There's a reactions I think you can like send thumbs ups or hearts or something. Oh gosh. Oh goodness. Because the last thing I want to do is perpetuate to a family member that they are a bad parent. Parents often tell themselves this on a random daily basis, depends on what's going on. They may have reacted in a certain way, and then they immediately go to judgment. And it's like, I don't want to continue though. I don't want to contribute to that. I want to come alongside them and say, okay, here's how you got here, right? Because that's how we got here. We grew up in an ableist society too. We get how some of these messages from medical providers can be very deficit oriented, how from schools can be deficit oriented from other important family members. It's everywhere. And so I can't expect the parent to catch that. I want to help them break some of that down and make sense of it, so that we can create a safe space for all of them. Okay. Similar things for adolescents and adults. I want to get a sense of their needs, physical needs that they may have, or sensory-based needs, and or communication devices that they may utilize. I work not more recently, right now I spend a lot of time working with adults with spinal cord injuries, and with paratetraplegia. And then, but before that was working with individuals with brain injuries who often had aphasia and so needed other assistive communication devices to engage. And so again, just understanding what does that look like? The therapeutic hour, it's cute, but it's actually, I mean, for some, it's not realistic, right? They may need more time. I may need to be more cognizant that I might not get paid for that extra time. But what is it? What am I trying to achieve therapeutically that might require me to pivot? And it may ensure I have 90 minutes instead of 60, or depending on the age, or 80 minutes instead of 50. It just depends, right? I might have to be very mindful of that. And as we talk about identity development, because adolescents and adults, young adults and adults have more language, they are able to share more about their world. And so I do want to get a sense of what is their relationship to their disability, and any other identity. Well, obviously, we're in a very specific context in this space, but any other identity that they hold that's important to them, I want to get a sense of what that is, right? Because for example, I am a gay brown man. I grew up with a lot of internalized racism that needed to have space. I needed someone to say, hey, what is your relationship to your culture, right? And let's if there's something there, we need to explore it. What may hinder identity development, and or what spaces can we do to offer more? What systems do they engage with? Again, I think one of the best things that has ever happened to me was when I was a voc rehab counselor for the state of Texas. I'm in Colorado. Uh, was they made us do Smurf training. I forgot what the Smurf stood for, but it was for Social Security. And so they got us trained in SSI, SSDI, all the work incentives, calculations, all those components that I would not have received otherwise. My obviously education didn't provide that because where is their space? And in a very strict curriculum. So it's understanding what systems do they engage in, but do I even understand the systems they're engaging in? I think is an important, crucial part. Just because we may be familiar with them, that's sometimes not enough when working with sensitive cases, especially when they're sharing important information that I might have education and or a resource to say, oh, before you do this, here's this. Let me plug you in. How do you bill for time that you know will not be paid for? Okay, good question. This is essentially when you work with interpreters. So yes, so there, depending on the code and the type of service, sometimes you can add on, you can bill twice. Just depends. So if I'm doing case manage, so for example, if I know I'm going to do case management, I'm going to bill, I might do that a different day so that I can bill case management code where it's in 15-minute increments. So I may do that. If I'm with them for an hour, obviously I'll bill for 4 instead of stacking it on the same day, where some insurance providers might be like, no, we're not doing that, even though it's a different service. And some are fine. Like it's been a hit or miss. I think I deal with Colorado Medicaid. They're pretty good about reimbursement when it comes to extended sessions. But there's modifiers that you can include. You just have to have a rationale. The thing is, that system is not set up to do that every session, right? So I know even if I bill for it, they may never pay for it, but I will show record that I provided an extended session. Okay. We hopefully we've talked about this somewhere in some space. We've gone there, we've been there, where we talk about broaching during intake and just during the initial rapport building sessions. Broaching identities is essential and crucial. Although my background has been in rehab, it's an entirety since I was a wee baby 20-year-old. That does not mean that um, even how I write my bio or whatnot, if a client reads that, I don't want them to make assumptions about me and the identities I hold. I want them to know how I show up, what type of work I do, and leave the door open for if I make a mistake, please tell me. I want to correct that, right? I want to show up for you correctly. And if I have to repair, please tell me. I can't tell you how often students and or practitioners in general, even those who have practiced for a long time, are so scared to just broach and just name the obvious, right? And about self and just make space for others and say, we may be different. And I still want to know the parts that are important to you. And if I get something wrong, please know you can tell me that the space is for correcting. That's okay. That's where it requires some good self-reflection so that you're not rattled and go into a shame spiral. That happens. It happens all the time. Um, we want to avoid harmful language. We already know these things, right? When we talk about just responsive language, I don't want to. A lot of people try to be really kind and not use the word disability, even though I don't. That fear, however it started, wherever it started, we can help others around us just be able to say like it's okay to say that. It is okay. It is a phenomenon. It is an experience. There are barriers, yes, but we can name oppression, discrimination experiences as real. Um, and yeah, let's see, let me move a little quicker. What I want to note is often when you're working in more behavioral, a lot of us are behaviorist. Nothing wrong with that. I see you. You're good. I'm a humanistic practitioner. The thing when we enter behaviorism, any form of behavior therapy, often the way it may be communicated is, and it's not to say it's its intention, but it's just the impact. Often with judgment and or with some messages that are not strength based. And so I want to know if I'm working to align more with creating a space that all self is accepted, then I need to figure out how do I show more strength based, given every message that this individual may have experienced from employers, from family systems, from community, from education, may have been not that, right? When they are unable to speak positively about themselves, when they mask their disability to fit in, when they work hard to appear and be like their non-disabled peers, right? I need to take all that context in to figure out what does my own language look like and how can I shift some of that so that it is more strength-based. It is more focused on the inherent good and capableness that is the individual with me. And we have to recognize that we need to focus on their disability, right? They may be like, yeah, I live with it. It's fine, right? Life is good. We keep going. I'm actually dealing with stressors with my relationship. Yeah, let's focus on your relationship. But that is when we conceptualize, that is part of the conceptualization, but it doesn't have to be the sole focus where we sometimes get stuck. Okay, let's talk about relationships. Honestly, the reason I went back to school for my PhD was because in working with people with brain injuries, I did not know what to do with couples. they would come. So I worked in a Center for Neuroskills, if you're familiar with them. They have some locations in Texas and California, maybe somewhere else. Vegas, I don't know. They've grown since I've been. And I would encounter individuals who acquired a disability, they're navigating a new identity, and then they're also navigating that in a family system that is also navigating a new identity. And how does this all fit and make sense? My training did not prepare me for any of that. And so I was really stuck. And even at the time, this was like 2015, when I was seeking education, when I was seeking resources, we just didn't talk about it. There was not a lot of trainings and resources to say, this is what Ben Matlin uses interable relationships. I think he's moved away from that, but just a way to capture an experience. What we do when someone is navigating a relationship, a romantic relationship, when one partner is disabled and one partner is not, either acquired and or they entered relationship that way. But I want to, as a practitioner, I want to understand how do they make meaning and sense of the disability, each of them. Depends on how you practice. If any of you in here see couples, one of the things that I learned has been super helpful for me over the years has been doing assessment sessions that are individual. I do them individually. So while I might see them initially together, when I meet with them individually, I'm seeing them separate so that I can really just hear their narrative, hear their story, allow them to say things that they may not want to say in front of their other partner for a variety of reasons. It might be affairs, it might be other things, not necessarily disability related, but could be. Because we know what I got to see anecdotally is this population deals with high incidences of separation and divorce and this is specific to those who acquire disability while in relationship because you have to consider this is a new identity that has emerged in their life, but also their relationship existed before this. What did the relationship look like? If it wasn't strong, if it wasn't positive, if things were not going well. And now at this, they have to respond well, right? Or as well resourced internally as possible. And here's where they struggle. And so really getting a sense of how they show up. Um, what was your relationship like before? How are they responding to it now? And to help get a sense of all of this, because we get to help ground them in the now rather than in maybe all the things that they're predicting that can go wrong, especially if they may be serving in a caregiver role as well as a partner, and both and how they are work in tandem and sometimes don't work well when one takes over and one identity takes over and the other one is suppressed. Um, so, things to consider. I'm going to say this and then we're going to move on. But fascinating stuff. So, when we think about development, this is why development is important. Never forget it. Always think about it. Is when I look at younger relationships, and this is specific to onset acquiring a chronic illness or disability, age matters on the potential success of the relationship. When you look at divorce rates, we don't have good data. We have nothing that captures is it because of an illness or a chronic illness or disability. It's like irreconcilable differences or, legal categories. But I don't know the exact number, but we know it happens. Not for everyone, but we know it does. And so, but when you look at what age it happens and when it does, for younger adults, you can consider if this is not an experience that they have had, an identity that they've had at all in their upbringing, this type of experience may shift their plans, right? It shifts their dreams for self and other, and that often creates a high level of stress where they might not tend to be successful if they don't get the support that they need. We tend to see that too with midlife couples. When we think about midlife, we're looking at like 35 to 55. This also tends to happen. You have to remember that we all go through a crisis, right? What do we call it? That word has midlife crisis. We call it a midlife crisis, right? It has its own right stigma and weirdness around it because a lot of decisions happen during that phase that might not align with uh, what's happening around them. But that crisis is essential. It's a developmental thing we all go through, and so it's often in that when that time comes, that developmental period is happening during midlife. And someone's navigating a disability in a relationship, this is often when we see that happen as well, especially if there was unmet relational needs that pre-existed the disability. And then fascinating, and this makes so much sense because as we all age, we all know this. Our bodies will change, our functioning will change, the way we engage with the world will change. And often it is those relationships that have better outcomes and success because it is expected. And so there's a different level of acceptance at the onset, even though there may be like navigating grief and just change and all of the things that come with it, but they do experience an ability to manage it differently. So, okay. Oh, we're gonna skip some of this. Okay. Brynn, will you join me?
Yes.
So when we think about, go ahead, Brynn. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So some of the things that we have been learning from the research study that we will talk about in a couple minutes is the types of practices that could be really helpful in terms of inclusivity and accessibility. So we're talking about these in terms of disability responsive practices. So questions to ask would be, how accessible are your services? We've added a document to the Google Drive that provides an example of a healthcare accessibility assessment. So for any type of healthcare practice, provider practice, a type of checklist that would allow you to be aware of your entrances, your parking lot, the restrooms, the paperwork, which might be electronic or it might be on paper, and then the actual therapy rooms. So things to consider, such as the width of the doorways, which need to be at least 36 inches wide, thinking about the distance from parking lot to the actual office, and then what types of furniture could be moved to be more accommodating to participants that might identify as disabled or come in with an adaptive technology with them. Go ahead, Joey. Go to the next one. So things related to paperwork. So if it's really on paper, ensuring that your font is at least 16 to 18 point font. And then making sure that there's an electronic copy available. One of the things that we learned, we had a high proportion of blind and low vision participants, and the number one thing that they said was, my forms are not screen reader accessible. So if I get a hard copy of a form I need to fill out, then it's not confidential. If I have my care partner or perhaps my spouse with me to be there in therapy, I don't get to fill out that form on my own. They are going to know every answer. Maybe I don't want them to know every answer. Many people talked about having those electronic forms that were mostly screen reader accessible until the signature line. And so the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, needs to be, your websites need to be reviewed in those PDFs that go through Adobe or any type of record. Those things need to be assessed before you give them to a participant for screen reader accessibility. One participant talked about getting to the end of a very, very long health history and not being able to sign it because the screen reader could not identify where the signature box was, and that's something that is absolutely possible to do, and lost all of that effort. Very, very frustrating. In terms of other responsive practices in terms of physical space, thinking about lighting. So having different settings for bright lights for people where they may have low vision and have some ability to read, and then making sure you have bright light, but also people that are more sensitive to bright lights needing those dimmers. Asking is the best way to identify their access needs. Go ahead, Joey. All right. Translation and interpreting services. I know somebody brought up interpretation. I think it was Cindy bringing up trying to work as an interpreter and then changing fields. Identify now, knowing where to knowing where to find those service providers for deaf and hard of hearing participants or clients. Sorry, I keep saying participants because think about the research study, but your clients. Contract with those that have specialized training or certification. Identify where those good resources are in your area. If you have a deaf or hard of hearing participant, ask them which interpreting services they like to use, that they prefer to use. It might be someone in person. It might be someone virtually joining in your room. Other things related to the space, identify different types of materials or textures for different chairs and different seating options, having appropriate fidgets for different clients who might identify as neurodivergent, and then minimizing overstimulation. So these are things that our checklist resource that we've provided to you can also walk you through.
And the other thing I want to mention that came from our study too is we had a few deaf participants. And one of the things that was shared was they went to couples therapy and the counselor wasn't fluent in sign language, so they had an interpreter, but they weren't cognizant that the interpreter changed every week. And so when you think about just communication, if I'm working to build rapport with my therapist, it helps that the person that's coming and assisting facilitate that is the same, right? That continuity is there. Because when you're starting over fresh, it's almost like one of the way they described it is like we're starting over every session basically, because there might be certain signs that this interpreter didn't catch, or ways in which how we communicate and or ways in how we describe our relationship, and context. Not necessarily that they needed it, but it helped. It just helped the therapeutic process. And so that's another thing. When you're providing services ongoing, is your way to get someone to be consistent.
Yeah. Real briefly, we'll talk about some of the main findings of the research project that we've been working on for the last year and a half or so. Our main aims, so go ahead and go to the next slide, Joey. Were to identify those experiences of ableism within mental health services that were experienced by disabled participants. And with that information, determine needs for disability competency or disability responsive training among all mental health service providers. So those are the biggest goals we had for this research project, and we'll go ahead and tell you just a little bit about our design. We started by developing an interview guide to help us understand what kind of therapy have you engaged in. What were your goals for therapy? What were the benefits of therapy? Were there negative experiences? What were your experiences with any assessments? What about asking for accommodations? Were accommodations provided? Were they beneficial? Asking about experiences of ableism, the ways that participants brought up their understanding of the relationship between disability and mental health. And then ask them what they thought would be needed for a training on disability for mental health providers. Basically, what do you wish your mental health providers knew about disability? We recruited nationwide across over 65 disability-related organizations, where we sent our research flyer, which was in Spanish, English, and ASL. Video, and we had over 120 people reach out to say, yes, I want to do your study. We had only planned to do 30. We ended up doing 50. We screened our participants just to make sure they had actually received mental health services, lived with disability, and then had them complete a survey on Qualtrics, which we had also checked for accessibility prior to delivery, and then we conducted our semi-structured interviews over Zoom. We are currently more than halfway through our analysis, so what we're presenting today and our findings that are relevant to this crowd here is still preliminary. Okay, we got some surveys. This is good. Okay, perfect. Like I said, we had 50 people complete the interview. Our demographics, so we had a pretty decent spread of different demographic identities represented. 30 female, 10 male, 7 identifying as non-binary, and 3 identifying as transgender. 31 white, 9 Asian or Pacific Islander, 3 Latinx, 3 Black or African American, 1 Native American, and 3 did not report. We did have an overrepresentation of those who reported vision as their primary disability. We believe this is because, one, at the very, very end of our recruitment, after we were in our 30s, we had this go live on some lists that reached a lot of different people. So 15 had more than one primary type of disability, 9 as cognitive or developmental, 5 as physical or mobility was their primary, and 2 as hearing. Okay, we are going to take 5 minutes to talk about our main findings. Related to some of the practices we've already talked about, the main barriers that our participants described were kind of logistics limitations. So these were things like cost, transportation, availability of services. We had quite a few rural participants. And then past negative experiences. We had so many participants say, after that counselor, I don't ever want to go again. I had been so mistreated. I experienced such discrimination, such an unwillingness to accommodate my needs in this therapeutic space that's supposed to be healing. Many with those past negative experiences were institutionalized, and brought up a lot of questions about their autonomy, about power dynamics in mental health, and that intersection between the power dynamics present already in mental health with the power dynamics present in terms of disability. These were things that often prohibited care. So these were like true barriers where it was like, yep, not possible. Then there were barriers that made things challenging, like that were annoying and frustrating and taxing, but people were able to move through. So things like scheduling, inaccessible forms and websites, like we talked about, inaccessible assessments, all made care seeking challenging, and made it a difficult process that added to the stress and impacted their mental health. Every single participant noted at least one aspect of their previous or current counseling setting that was just inaccessible to them, as it was. And so that might have been, well, my counselor wants me to fill out this worksheet every time, but it's on paper, and I can't do that. Or because of where I live, I have to do telehealth, but I really would rather not do telehealth. It would be better for me in person because of different aspects of my disability. So everybody noted at least one thing that was just inaccessible. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. We did have a very strong subtheme related to the limitations of different assessments. So many, if not most, of our participants found the assessments themselves inaccessible. So maybe it was a form that couldn't be completed on their own confidentially, or it was a series of tasks that required them to identify images or identify visual items that they could not access for our blind and low vision participants. For our neurodivergent participants, these were found to be inaccessible because they were too rigid. And so kind of scanning down a little bit, it seemed that they could not engage with lots of questionnaires because it was too rigid of a range, and they couldn't find themselves in those questions, and so they found them to be inaccurate. They were seen as repetitive and burdensome, and sometimes they didn't like having to do that with the time crunch. So for our neurodivergent participants or those with cognitive disabilities or developmental disabilities, that time crunch was made it really difficult to give honest answers. And there were lots of ethical concerns with care partners or family members providing assistance to fill these assessments out. Our next theme is related to how relevant disability was in counseling. This relates to what Joey was talking about with broaching, and how related is this disability to what they're seeking mental health treatment for. So lots of participants said, no, disability has very little bearing on my need for counseling. I've got a mental health concern. I have adjusted to my disability. A lot of our participants who were born with that identity were like, no, I don't need to talk about this. And they experienced therapists that insisted on helping them adjust to their disability, and they found that very patronizing and very, very frustrating. They weren't being listened to. They said, no, I need help with this relationship, or I need help with this stress. Some participants could acknowledge or wish that their therapist could acknowledge that the disability itself didn't make life harder, but ableism absolutely affected their mental health. So it's not that I'm depressed because I'm disabled. It's because people treat me poorly because I'm disabled. Being disabled is fine. Being treated badly because I'm disabled is not fine. So they wanted that nuance from their counselors. And some did experience mental health conditions as their disability, so psychiatric or psychological disabilities. And these participants saw disability and mental health inextricably linked. So nuance and being able to discuss, and like Joey provided the great prompt of how do you see this as influencing your life, or how do you see this as related to your mental health? The next theme, really quickly, we can just talk ever so briefly about recommendations. A lot of participants just said, I just wish my counselor would just go learn about disability a little bit. I just need a little bit. They were frustrated by the ongoing labor of disability education that they felt they had to provide to their therapists in session. One of our quotes was, it's on my time, that's on my dime. I'm literally paying for it. I'm literally paying to educate my mental health provider. It was really frustrating. Some emphasize just, oh, please just be curious. Please, I just want there to be respectful communication. I want to have autonomy, rather than, describing a list of topics that the training should include. And other participants talked about just some key disability-related policies, ADA rights, digital and physical accessibility standards, saying, like, this is against the law. I'm dealing with things that are against the ADA guidelines. Many did ask for condition-specific resources to be included, and then just some communication essentials. So these are parts of our next steps, is to develop this training as continuing education for people across a wide range of mental health professions. We have one quote I do want to share, and then we have some time for questions. This quote is from, and this is a pseudonym. Quinn says, just because your brain works one way this day doesn't mean it works the same the next day. And just because you saw one person with this condition doesn't mean you understand how to treat every person with this condition. Just make sure this is individualized, that the therapy itself is individualized, and letting people know, hey, disability accommodations are a thing. If you need help filling out this paperwork, or if you need reminders for certain things, we can give that to you. These participants really wanted just the accommodations that they needed to be able to get these services that they were seeking. Then Quinn says, there's all this paperwork I have to do, and I start seeing a new provider. It's so daunting. I have to be so vulnerable. And then I'm asked to retell 99% of it in the actual session. It's kind of like, what's the point of filling out this paperwork? Therapists being very clear with their intentions, asking themselves, why am I asking this person to do this? Why do I think about this? Why do I think this way about this condition? And being sure to challenge different assumptions that they may have about how different things work and how they should treat people. So that's kind of the long and short of what we've learned from this research study in preparation for developing ongoing training. I know this is a group of people who have way more disability knowledge than those that are coming into mental health counseling from a different degree, different background. And so I think we recognize that we are preaching to the choir. And so if there are other suggestions, things that you have found in your own practices that you think would be helpful and essential for a training such as the one that we're working on, we invite you to reach out, put it in the chat, email us directly. These would be things that would be really helpful. Joey, anything you want to add?
No, thank you just for being here, taking this in. I'll get to Vicky's question, but I want to just thank you all for your time.
I see we do have one question in the chat. What home-based activities do you suggest for your clients, especially deaf clients, engage in to help prepare them for work and community integration?
Yes, good question. And so one of the things to consider is being having spent a lot of time in the deaf community, there's a difference between growing up in a ASL fluent household and with maybe deaf parents or deaf relatives, and then there's individuals who grow up in a hearing world and then can maybe learn ASL later in life and or home-based sign. Etc. And so when I'm working with an individual, I do need to know that background. Again, it gives me developmental information that is essential so that I know how to show up. So if I can collect that information, and let's say this individual learned ASL in high school, started to connect with the deaf community in their late teens, then I need to know that I need to also understand how comfortable are they navigating hearing spaces. Just because they grew up in it doesn't mean they know how to. And are there barriers there with how they their level of comfort in bringing up things or reaching out. It's many like many minoritized folks feel, right? It's like I'm not. I have this identity, but I don't feel like I completely belong, and I'm like here but not here. So I'll speak for myself. Like I'm Mexican American, but if I go to Mexico, which I was just there last month, gorgeous, beautiful, please go. Uh, I don't necessarily. I'm not Mexican enough when I'm there, but when I'm here, I'm not wide enough, right? And so there's this kind of constant movement, and so I want to understand what is that like for that deaf individual when do they actually feel community? My eyes twitching, so much caffeine. Is there actual community that they feel that they can easily tap into, or is there hesitancy because I'm not deaf enough, or I'm not right deaf enough, capital D? Because then I can start to figure out, okay, how can I help them move through some of that anxiety that might be present that would get in the way of engaging in work and or seeking employment.
Thank you. And thinking in terms of the research you all did and hearing from the voices of the people who experience it, I'm wondering how many of those same people meeting with rehabilitation counselors um, run into that too. And we just don't recognize that. And so it is, as uh, someone said, it's you may be preaching to the choir, but it's important to hear the sermon again. So, um, really appreciate your time, both of you, the work that you're doing to elevate voices of disabled folks, and sharing that with our members and community. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And Vicky, connect with me. I shared my email. We can chat more offline.
Okay,
Um,
sounds good.
thank, thank you all so much for your time. Have a lovely evening.
Take care, all. Thank you so much for attending.